Hi, welcome back to All About the Alternative. One of my alternatives is looking back at nostalgia, and today we're going to look back at some board games, some ones that have become very relevant to me, and there are lots out there. There are tons of different board games out there. Today we're just going to look at a few of them, and we'll do a follow-up perhaps on another video in the future. Stick with me. I'll be right back and we'll talk all about board games. So here we are. We're looking at board games as a nostalgic purpose today, and basically looking at where they've come from, what were they way back when, and what has become of them. So we have different games that all the board games you played when you were kids, and games you're playing with your kids now. Have they changed? What do they change like? Maybe the ones I'm not mentioning here today, you can put into the comments, and we'll talk about those games in the future, and they'll become a source for a new video in the future as well. So we'll do that. So join me with me here. What we're going to do is have a look at a couple of different games that have become very nostalgic to myself. Um, they're not in any particular order. They're all very relevant, very, they've had a place in my life in some way, and so that's why I have chosen these as as the games that I've chosen. So we're going to start off with the game of Clue. Now, if you're aware of some rules of YouTube, it's going to start sounding like a Bob Newhart comedy sketch if I start talking YouTube terms. So I'm going to do the best I can with this one, but I wanted to include it. It's called Clue, and of course, it's the unaliving mystery game of, from way back when. And it was invented actually in 1943 by a British musician, Anthony Pratt, inspired by an unaliving mystery party during World War II, and was patented in 1947. Basically, there's different versions of it. There are lots of different ways to play it, and of course, it has evolved over time. What it changed from, at times, it had a board that had it had a study in it. It had a billiards table. It had a conservatory. And in some versions, that conservatory got changed into a an observatory, and the study got changed into a spa, and the lounge got changed into the guest house or something like that. In the computerized versions of these games, there is many other changes that they've done as well. Now, obviously, all of these games have ways that you can change some of the rules. There are obviously kids' versions of these games, and of course, it's just a great way to play a family game. Most of these are all family-style games, of course. So you can play them with 2 players. You can play them with 6 players, and you basically have you have all of your cards. So you have the suspect cards, and you have the room cards, and you have the unaliving devices. And so you take those into account, and you take one of each of them and you put them into an envelope in the middle of the game, and it's chosen at the very start before you even see anything. Then you deal out a few cards to everybody, and of course they have a few of each of the different things, and through deduction you choose what the answer is, who did it, and what they do it with, and what room they did it in. And if you've got it right, you're the winner. And hopefully, as you're going on with the actual original board game, you would show if you had a card, and there would be actually a piece of paper. You would actually keep track of what information you gained. So if you know that somebody else has a card, it's not in those 3 cards in the middle of the game, and of course, that it's really easy to do that way, of course. And somewhere in the 90s, obviously, we also had a movie version of the game, which brought out a lot of new players to the game, and of course, a lot more interest to the game again. It started off with, of course, Parker Brothers originally had the game when they produced it, and then of course it got changed to Hasbro, took it over for ownership. And of course, they also have the computerized versions of the game, and the PS3 or PS5 now, the different versions of the game that they have, all basically run under the same idea. I think all of those are under Hasbro at this point. I'm not sure if they actually they actually do exist in other platforms. My experience is with PS3, so that's what I've used. I've also had computerized versions of the game as well, but over time they have evolved the actual image of them. You can actually get a downloadable copy that you can actually make your own rooms up if you want, and you can make your own list of suspects and your own devices that you can use, and those are all what you can. They're all really easy to create that, whatever you're using. I remember the old board game, the very first board game, had squares on it that if you touch the board with some of the pieces, it actually scratched up the board. I think they developed that again later on and fixed all of that so that the material that the board was made out of wasn't going to cause that. Some of them are actually made out of plastic, and those are the boards as well. There are also versions of the game as well that are more travel friendly. But there are also versions of the game that are huge, gigantic games, and there are many of those. And that's the game of Clue. There are, like I said, many different versions out there. There are children's versions, and in French you might find it actually, instead of as Clue, as Cluedo. Let's get on with the next one. Our next game here is Sorry. And of course, I think it's a Canadian thing to say sorry a lot. But somehow, in the Canadian version of it, we got a version called Oops, which I spotted in Canadian Tire at one time. So that's looked very much like a very Canadian version of the same game, which is actually called Sorry, and it was patented by William Henry Story in England in 1929, and based on a classic Indian game of Pachisi, which you probably are aware of as well. The British manufacturer Waddington's initially produced the game of the UK with Parker Brothers, later adopting it for the North American market in 1934, making a hit as a staple of classic board games. It had some different versions of it, different looks to it, different ways of playing it, and most people stick to the same style of rules, but so in some cases you actually just pick a card up and you go with what card it is. In other versions you deal out the cards and you have, like, say, 5 cards, and we'll choose from your 5 cards which one you want to do. And there are different things you can actually do, like switching characters, or using the thing of sorry, and to get your man out to go to wherever another character is and take them off the board. Some simple things like that, and of course whoever gets their 4 men from their start into a home base at the very end, the first one who gets all 4 in by the end of the game is the winner. This one actually is a very easy game to play. It's actually very versatile to playing it with a family, and usually it's 4 players. You can also team up some players and do some versions of this game as well. And I've also got this one as a computerized game, and play it quite often. And so this one here also, like I said, it was trademarked actually in 1929 in the UK. It didn't come to the States until about 1934, and it was then taken over by Parker Brothers, and eventually went again to Hasbro. Uh, and they took it over as well, and have made many versions of it now as well. I know that Hasbro has taken over quite a number of these games so that they can produce them in other formats. Obviously, there are many different types, there are many different things. There are, again, giant versions of them as well that you can play out in a living room or out outside with your family members as well, and just have a fun time with these big, huge things. I may have gotten some of those pictures of them, so I will be posting up some of those pictures on here as well, like I normally do. So you'll see some of that popping up. And of course, there's a lot of other changes that they've made to the board, from the old style original game board to some sleeker looking versions of it as well. And there are also, again, travel versions of the exact same games. Our next one is Payday, which seems to have more of a bigger evolution to its game than the first two that I've mentioned, but the Payday board game was created and invented by Paul J. Gruen and his brother-in-law, Charles C. Bailey. It was first released by Parker Brothers in 1974. The game simulates financial planning and money management, using a calendar-shaped board where the characters collect their monthly wages and pay bills and expenses. Much like you would today. It's kind of a great introduction to your children or to anybody on how to manage for monthly with the different bills and different things. It actually is played in different aspects. So of course there are a couple different versions of this game as well that went from the original game to where it's now it's changed somewhat as far as what it actually says it is. They had mail cards and they had deal cards, and basically you get to choose on certain squares whether you want to take a deal and buy the deal, and then you get a buyer later on which will buy the deal from you and pay whatever the amount that's worth it in the end for it as well. So you're hoping you're making some extra money, and in the end, of course, the person with the most money at the end of however long you decide. Now, some people decide just to play the game as is, so the 1 month, which doesn't do a whole lot, doesn't give you a whole lot of training to it, or really give you a whole lot. But if you only have time to play the one round of it, you can do that. You can also choose to say you want to play for a year, or you want to only play for 6 months, or whatever it is. You choose a certain length of time that you want to play the game for, and at the end of that time frame, whoever has the most money wins the game. There is usually some peg stick things that instead of looking like pegs, they actually look like $signs in most cases. In some cases I have seen the game actually be with peg pieces as well. It really depends on which version of the game you get. And of course, like I said, some of the things have changed. There's actually a lottery thing. Some people actually change into variations as well, that everything you pay for goes into a pot, and whoever rolls a 12, for example, or a 6, I'm not sure if that's depending on what you choose as your game way to play. To roll the 6, that person gets the pot that's in there. That's a couple of variations to the rules. And in most games, a lot of people do just they change the game to what actually style suits their family or the people that they're playing with. Maybe one household has played it one way, another household's played it a different way. They come together and say, hey, I want to change a rule here and there. Some people do customize it the way they like. And there are actually versions of the game. There are customized versions of the game as well, where you can put your own different things in it of what you want to happen when you land on certain squares. There are versions of that out there as well, and there is printable versions of it that you can download for most of these types of games, because they realize that people have different ideas about how they want to play, and people customize things all the time to suit them. Let's get on to the next one. Our next one is Monopoly. And this one actually originated from a game called Landlord's Game, created by Elizabeth Maggie in 1904. It was illustrated by Henry George's single tax theory and critique of the harmful effects of land monopolies, which makes sense, of course. Basically, you had 10 properties throughout the board that you had to collect, and there's a couple of them that only have 2, and there's a couple there, and most of the rest of them all have 3 properties on them. And you go around the board, and as you roll the die, you actually, as you land on different things. There are 2 different versions actually. One is to actually distribute out some of the properties ahead of time, so everyone has maybe 2 or 3 properties to start with, and the other version is just to start off as fresh as possible, and you land on whatever you land on. You decide if you want to buy the property or set it up for auction, and the other people who you're playing with, between 2 to 4 players, would decide if they want to buy the property as well. So they'll bid on the property, and sometimes it'll go out much higher than the price that the actual original was for, or it may wind up being a whole lot less if somebody doesn't bid on it very high. So they'll start at a low bid and work their way up, just like you would in a normal auction. And so you go along, and you also can sell your property to another, or trade properties between you and another player. I believe there are ways actually to play with more than 4 players, but sometimes that can get a little bit cumbersome after a while to play with more than 4 players, but it can be done. So yeah, whoever winds up with all the properties in the end is usually the winner, or you set a time limit to a specific time. Apparently this game has been played in players around the world, playing internationally, and they played up to 32 days in a row trying to play the game until it was won by 1 player. That's what I believe is the longest game ever played. So basically that was the when it started in 1904 being developed. In the 1930s is when they actually developed the actual Monopoly game. Distributed by Parker Brothers in the 1930s, it was actually brought out in the one version that you would originally have for many years, and it had the first property was Mediterranean and Baltic, and they were in purple. In 2008, it got changed, and the boards just basically just phonetics changes, just a difference in change that they decided to come up with. They changed it from the purple to brown for those 2 properties, and it's been that ever to this point. And of course the computerized versions and any of the other versions all now have that as a brown property instead of a purple property. I think it got mixed up probably between the dark blue or the for the more expensive property, and maybe that is why they changed it. It's one of those suggestions I had that may have been the reason for that change. The Monopoly board also featured squares like Chance and Community Chest, which also gave you the opportunity to do different things, such as either going to jail or getting a get out of jail free card, or moving to a specific square on the board so you could purchase it ahead of when you would normally have gone to it. Or if someone else has already purchased it, they also would have maybe put on, if they had all of the properties of that one color, they start building on it. So you can put your green houses or red hotels on it. And if they did that, as you put different houses on, so 1 to 4 houses on each square, and up to 1 hotel per property, and you got different amounts of money. If you landed on that square, you had to pay the money. If you didn't have it, you either had to mortgage what you did own yourself, or you went bankrupt and you lose the game. And the person who winds up with the most amounts of those properties and doesn't go bankrupt in the end, everybody else will go bankrupt before the end of the game, and the person left standing is the winner. So, and often people will trade up properties, help each other out. In some cases, you'll see games like this where they'll help each other to, hey, I got this property, you got that property. I'll either sell it to you, or we'll trade properties and give them a certain amount of cash, or maybe they've got something else. Maybe they got a get out of jail free card, so that if you do wind up in jail, you can get out of jail free without having to pay the $50 it would have cost you to get out of jail. There's also a free parking square that some people make up different rules for that square, where if you, in some cases, if you roll a 12, you get the money in the what we call the pot, the free parking square. If not, if you land on it, you would also get the possibility of that. Some people put a certain amount in there and they put the $500 Monopoly money on that square, as the banker would put that on the square, so that if anybody lands on that square, that's what they get. And if they roll the die for the 12, perhaps they would actually they would get that pot as well. So some games have different variations that some people have done. Some people, it just suits them to have those rules in there. If you land on go, you get double your pay. Or the amount you start off with as well can also be determined by the players before they begin as well. The amount they have to pay for tax squares also can be adjusted as well. It is in that way for the computerized game. You can make adjustments to all those things as well before you begin the game, so that when you're playing, the computer already knows what to change and what to do. And basically, yeah, so you have the game that whoever winds up with the most amount of money and they have all the properties is the winner at the end. Let's get on to the next one. Our last one for today is the Game of Life. This one here, simply known in the beginning as Life, is a board game originally created in 1860 by Milton Bradley as a checkered game of life, and apparently the first ever one. The history of the Game of Life has two main phrases: the checkered game of life in 1860, and a moralistic game played with a Tito of the modern iconic 1960s version, created by Reuben Klamer for Milton Bradley's company 100th anniversary, which introduced a three-dimensional board and a spinner. And basically, I remember getting this board, and we had to put together the all the parts that go in it. You had little mountains with little parts you had to roll your cars over and stuff like that. And of course, all the little houses and stuff that you'd put on the board, they were all actual pieces that you'd put on the board. In the newer version, they don't have that, and of course, that's one game that really evolved over time. There's also a game called Careers that's very identical to the ideals of this game as well. It gave basic opportunity knocks, and you would go through different paths and that. But the Game of Life itself, it became in 1960. It became a game of financial decisions. You basically choose between going to college, or you choose business choices instead. And of course, the game was always that you had to stop to graduate from high school or graduate from university and make a decision if you actually are going to go to college. I guess you decide if you want to go to college or you want to just go on a career path, which had different consequences. There was, of course, different values to how much your pay would be if you chose those cards for whatever career you chose. For example, choosing teacher would be $40,000 a year. Or if you chose the path of becoming a doctor, you would make $100,000, or a veterinarian would be $80,000. But you had to make a choice on a career at that time. Then you went along, of course, and you had to get married. Everybody stopped, and you had to get married. You also had to stop. You had to buy a house, and you also had to change up your house partway through. And of course, you also had to stop for retirement. and different things like that. Along the way, you also had kids. Now, when you played this game, you had a little car. Now, this is how it began out. Of course, you had a little car, and it had 6 slots in it. The later versions had 4. But, of course, they had little peg people. Now, they had little blue and pink pegs that determine male or female, kids that you got. In the original version of it, of course, it would say if you had you had a baby boy, you had a baby girl, or you had twins, and I think it determined whether you had a girl and a boy, or you had 2 girls, you had 2 boys. When you landed on certain things, or you adopted twins in the first version of the game. And if you landed on certain things, landed on those things like getting married, and when you had a kid, you got money from the other players as gifts for those things. Financial planning and everything else included in everything you do, of course, and you buy the house, and you also determined if you wanted to buy some insurance on like fire insurance or car insurance. And along the way, if you landed on a square that perhaps your house burned up in a fire, you had to pay. But if you had the insurance card, you didn't pay. So you had many, many options. Of course, when it came to those little peg people, there's only so much room on it. But of course, like we have like the family vloggers that adopt 100 kids. I'm exaggerating, but you pile them in as you need to, and that was the saying that goes. You just pile them on as they accumulate, and you continue on until the very end of the game. And at the very end of the game, the more you have, the more you more value. So of course your job gives you a certain value at the end of the game, and how many kids you had, and if you had those insurances, you cashed them in, and the house you had cashed in, and so you got the value of all of that in the end. When you were finished the game, you wait for all the other players to finish the game as well, and whoever had the best value, the best financial plan by the end of the game is the winner. So and later versions of the game, of course, were a little bit different. You had cards that were called action cards, and those actually they determined whether or not you did certain things. Maybe you got another player to play something with you and get some money for doing things as well, instead of just yourself. And and of course the computerized versions of the game later on, I have a funny story with it as well. That of course when years ago when I had my stepdaughter, I introduced her to the game actually with the computer game first. She had never seen the board game, and she saw an advertisement for the board game. We've played the computer game quite often, so it was a big thing around my place to do that. And of course she goes, "There's a board game version of it now," which has always been a source of something to be a little bit amused on that, but we always thought that was a funny thought. So, but of course today a lot of people all do have computers and things like that. Now when it comes to Monopoly and the Game of Life, they have electronic versions of them where you don't have to have the paper money anymore, or even have the little pegs of the little people. It stores it all in electronic information, and you use what's called a credit card for your player thing. And so every time you do something, you go to the little electronic box, and it determines how much money you have, and what the value is of everything. So when you have a child in the game, it gives you a value on it right away, and you already know what your value is towards the end of the game. If you have to pay something, you pay it. If you have to trade something and you trade some money, it goes to the other player right away, and it's all stored electronically, and which takes away from the the actual learning how to deal with money and things like that by the actual player. There also is in the original version as well that you could actually borrow money. I believe you can do that in the electronic version as well, but it sort of takes all that away and the game keeps track of it rather than the player. There's some good and bad to that, I guess. And that's basically how it works. So, if this has been an interest to you, hopefully you can give me a like and a subscribe. And have you played some of these games? What variation did you play with it? When did you play it? Did you play it back in years and years ago? Maybe decades ago you played the game? Or are you playing them now? And just introducing your children or your family to these games. Put a note in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day, everybody.